My life used to be controlled, predictable. Wake up, grind at Sterling Trade, maybe grab a drink with Maya and Liam, sleep, repeat. It wasn't thrilling, but it was mine. I was good at my job, damn good. I'd carved out a space in that Shark Tank, proved I belonged. Then I met him. Lucas. God, even now, the name feels like a punch to the gut. We met at some god-awful party Maya dragged me to. I was hating every second. The music a physical assault, the crowd a sweaty mass of desperation. He was standing off to the side, alone nursing a beer. He had this quiet intensity about him that drew me in. Not your scene either, huh? He'd yelled over the thumping bass. His eyes crinkled when he smiled. I felt a connection. Instantaneous. Definitely not, I shouted back, relieved to find someone else who looked as miserable as I felt. Cousin Duty. Yours? Brother Guilt? He chuckled, shaking his head. He's convinced I need to get out more. We ditched the party faster than you can say overpriced cocktail. Found a quiet bar a few blocks away. Suddenly, I could breathe again. He was easy to talk to, genuine and honest. He told me about his failed marriage, no sugarcoating, no blaming. She cheated, he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. It sucked, but it's over. I respected that. The honesty, the lack of drama. We started dating. Fast forward a few months, and we were building a life. He was everything I thought I wanted, stable, kind, and successful. But Lucas came with a package deal, Susan. The Sunday brunch at Susan's was like walking into a meticulously staged movie set. The house was spotless, every knick-knack perfectly placed. The air smelled like burnt offering to the gods of domesticity. And then there was Susan. She emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a pristine apron. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, felt like they were peeling away layers of me I didn't even know existed. "Lucas, my boy," she boomed, engulfing him in a hug. Then her gaze snapped back to me. "And you must be Tessa. Lucas has told me so much." The way she said so much made my skin crawl. It wasn't an expression of excitement, but a threat. "Miss S. Thompson, it's a pleasure," I said, extending my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong, almost aggressive. "Call me Susan, dear." Miss S. Thompson was my mother-in-law. And, well, she could be standing in front of me if I like you more. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Warning bells started clanging in my head. The brunch itself was an interrogation masquerading as polite conversation. The questions were relentless, designed to poke holes in my carefully constructed armor. "So, Tessa, Lucas tells me you're quite the career woman." "Trading, is it?" "A man's world, wouldn't you say?" "It's trading, Susan, and it's for anyone who's good at it," I replied, keeping my tone light, fighting the urge to bristle. Lucas, bless his heart, tried to intervene. "Tessa's one of the top traders at her firm. She's amazing at what she does." Susan's response was dismissive. "That's lovely, dear, but I do hope you know how to cook. Lucas needs someone who can keep him fed. You can't work all of the time." I managed a tight smile. "I love to cook. Lucas can vouch for my lasagna." Indeed, Lucas confirmed enthusiastically, grabbing my hand under the table. "Well, isn't that something?" Susan replied, her tone dripping with skepticism. "Perhaps you'll have to make it for me one of these days. We can all be together, cooking in the kitchen." The rest of the meal was a minefield of thinly veiled insults and passive-aggressive jabs. She grilled me about everything: my family, my hobbies, my future plans. It was clear she saw me as a threat. As we were leaving, Susan pulled me aside, her voice a low, menacing hiss. "Listen, Tessa, my son's happiness is everything to me. I'll do whatever it takes to protect him. Remember that." "I have no intention of hurting Lucas," I said, meeting her gaze, my voice steady. "You have nothing to worry about." She studied me for a long moment, her eyes narrowed. "We'll see, won't we?" That was the start of my personal nightmare. Lucas's job meant frequent travel, which meant I was alone with Susan. The accidental visits started within weeks. "Just in the neighborhood, dear," she'd say, barging into my house like she owned the place. Thought I'd drop by to see how things were going. She'd snoop through my things, offering unsolicited advice on everything from cleaning products to flower arrangements. My home, my sanctuary, became a prison. Then came the appearances. The grocery store, the gym, the coffee shop near my work. It was too frequent to be coincidence. She was stalking me. Susan. I confronted her one afternoon at the grocery store. "This is the third time this week." "What's going on?" She feigned innocence, her eyes wide. "Why, Tessa? Can't a woman do her shopping?" "Not at the exact same places and times as me consistently." "What are you trying to do?" Her smile vanished, replaced by a venomous glare. "I'm keeping my eyes open, Tessa. You can play the perfect wife all you want, but I know what you really are." "And what's that, Susan?" My voice was barely a whisper, the air thick with tension. "A user, a gold digger, and soon, a cheater. Lucas deserves better than you. You have no desire to stay faithful to my son." Every encounter left me shaken, furious. I felt like I was suffocating. And Lucas? He was oblivious, wrapped up in his work, trusting his mother, trusting me. He didn't see the subtle digs, the constant surveillance. He didn't understand the toll it was taking. I didn't want to burden him. Susan's eyesight was getting worse. Her reliance on her glasses became increasingly sporadic. She hated them. Her poor vision added a layer of paranoia and suspicion to her already obsessive nature. One evening, needing to escape, I met my brother, Jake, for dinner. It was just a casual catch-up, a chance to vent and feel normal. We met at an outdoor restaurant with a terrace. Jake was his usual goofy self, cracking jokes and making me laugh. It was exactly what I needed. As we said goodbye, I gave him a hug. Brotherly love. Harmless. But the damage was done. I walked into my house later that night, exhausted but feeling a little lighter. The house was dark, empty. I flipped on the light in the living room. I gasped. Susan was sitting on my couch, a smug expression plastered on her face. She was holding a digital camera. "What the hell, Susan? What are you doing in my house?" My voice trembled with rage. She rose from the couch, holding up the camera. "Gotcha," she said, her voice dripping with malicious triumph. "Got what?" I snapped, my patience wearing thin. She thrust the camera in my face, showing me a photo of Jake and me hugging. "Caught you red-handed with your lover." I rolled my eyes. "That's my brother, Jake. We had dinner." "That's it," Susan snorted, a harsh, mocking sound that made my fists clench. "Sure, your brother. I know what I saw." "Oh, really? And what did you see?" I snapped back, my patience at its breaking point. Her face flushed with anger, and she fumbled with the camera, finally shoving it toward me. "See for yourself." I took the camera, half expecting some blurry, zoomed-in shot taken from a distance. But there it was, a clear photo of Jake and me, mid-hug, smiling, just a brother and sister enjoying a night out. I couldn't help but laugh, which only seemed to infuriate her more. "What's so funny?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Here, look," I said, handing the camera back to her. "Put on your glasses, Susan. It's just me and Jake." For a moment, she hesitated. Then, muttering under her breath, she dug in her purse and pulled out her glasses. She slipped them on, looked at the photo again. I watched her face change as she finally saw what was really there. "Now, I think it's time you left," I said firmly, my resolve hardening. Susan looked like she wanted to argue, but then she just nodded stiffly and headed for the door. "This isn't over," she muttered as she left. The few weeks Lucas was home were a brief reprieve. We were inseparable, catching up on lost time, trying to rebuild the connection that had been frayed by Susan's constant interference. But it was never enough time. His trips were long, grueling, and each time he left, I felt a piece of myself wither away. This time was different. Susan decided to move in. She showed up at my doorstep one afternoon, suitcase in tow, announcing her stay as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "It's for the good of the family, Tessa," she declared, pushing past me into the living room. "I'm here to make sure you don't get into any trouble." I called Lucas, my voice shaking with frustration. "She can't just move in here, Lucas. You need to talk to her." His sigh on the other end of the line was heavy with resignation. "Tessa, please, just try to get along. I don't want to fight with her about this. It's only for a few weeks." Reluctantly, I agreed. Hanging up the phone, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. This wasn't going to be easy. Susan wasted no time taking over. She followed me around, critiquing everything I did. "You're folding those towels all wrong," she'd say. "You missed a spot there. Do it again." She even took over the kitchen. "I need to keep my son from starving," she would say. Her deteriorating eyesight made her cooking a disaster zone. She constantly oversalted or overpeppered everything, and if it turned out bad, she blamed me. "You distracted me," she'd snap. "You're trying to sabotage me." During the weekdays, her behavior grew even more suffocating. She sat in the living room, a notebook in her lap, jotting down the times I left for work and came home. If I was even a few minutes late, she'd greet me with a sneer. "Late again, huh? Busy day or busy boyfriend?" "It was traffic, Susan," I'd retort, my patience fraying. Like it is for millions of people every day, her insinuations were relentless. Each day ended with me locking myself in the bedroom, fuming but helpless. Lucas's plea echoed in my mind. Just try to get along. I had to hold myself back from unleashing the torrent of anger. I was trapped, suffocated, and slowly losing my mind. A month into Susan's invasive stay, I finally got the news I'd been waiting for. A promotion. And not just any promotion, but a chance to train at the company's headquarters in another city. I'd been working toward this for years. This was my chance. When I told Lucas, his excitement was palpable. "That's incredible, babe. I'm so proud of you," he enthused. "Don't worry about the time apart. It'll fly by and we'll be back together before you know it." Despite the distance and the issues with his mother, his support was unwavering. It bolstered my spirits, filled me with warmth and determination. I knew I could survive this. Then came the dreaded task telling Susan. I broke the news to her one evening, trying to keep the conversation light and straightforward. "Susan, I've been promoted. I'll need to go to another city for a while for training." Her reaction was as expected, sour and accusatory. "So, you're running off to another city now? What's really there, Tessa? A lover?" She spat, her words dripping with venom. I sighed, frustration bubbling inside me. "It's for training, Susan. There's no lover." "Why is that so hard for you to believe?" She snorted, her expression twisted in disbelief. "Sure, training. Just convenient timing, isn't it? As soon as Lucas is gone, you find a reason to leave too." I shook my head, unable to hide my irritation. "Believe what you want, Susan. I'm going." And that's final. With Lucas's blessing ringing in my ears, I packed my bags that night, eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere of my own home. Susan's persistent mistrust and conspiracy theories had drained me. The idea of a few weeks away felt like a breath of fresh air. Settling into my temporary apartment in the new city brought a sense of freedom. No Susan lurking around every corner, no insinuations or bitter comments at every turn. I was doing well in the training, making new connections, and actually enjoying my evenings in peace. More than once, I found myself thinking how pleasant life was without Susan watching my every move. Then, one ordinary afternoon, as I returned from a session, my phone pinged with a new voicemail from Susan. The content of that message shattered my newfound peace. Tessa, her voice was laced with icy triumph. "I hope you're enjoying your time with your lovers, because you won't have a home to come back to. I've taken care of everything. The house is sold. Stay where you are, for all I care." Chills ran down my spine. I replayed the message, my mind racing. It couldn't be true. Lucas owned the house. Nothing could be done without his signature. Yet, the malicious glee in Susan's voice couldn't be ignored. What had she done? I called Lucas immediately, panic edging my voice, but the call went straight to voicemail. He was still on his business trip, likely in meetings or on a flight. I felt helpless, stuck in another city, the seeds of doubt Susan had planted now sprouting relentless anxiety. As the days passed with no return call from Lucas, my mind conjured all sorts of disastrous scenarios. Had Susan forged his signature? Was it even legally possible to sell a house like that? The questions tormented me, gnawing at my focus and sleep. Despite the turmoil, I forced myself to continue with the training. I'd worked too hard to let Susan's potentially empty threats derail my progress. But it was difficult. Every lecture, every assignment was overshadowed by the gnawing fear that I was losing everything. By the end of the training program, I was mentally exhausted, not just from the courses, but from the emotional roller coaster Susan had sent me on. I rushed back to the city, every mile feeling like an eternity. I walked into the house, my mind still reeling from the chaos of the past few weeks. There, in the middle of the living room, stood Susan, squinting at me as if she couldn't quite make out who I was. She wasn't wearing her glasses again, which explained the unsure look on her face. But as I got closer, her expression shifted to one of smug triumph. "Welcome back, Tessa," she said, her voice dripping with venomous cheerfulness. "I have some news for you." I dropped my bag by the door, bracing myself. "What now, Susan?" She thrust a stack of papers at me. "Here, read this. It's all settled. The house has been sold. You don't belong here anymore. Or in this family, for that matter." Her words were cold and calculated. The claim was so outrageous that, for a moment, I was too shocked to speak. "What are you talking about?" "Lucas would never agree to sell our house without discussing it with me first." "Oh, but he did. And he's tired, Tessa. Tired of your endless affairs," she added, a harsh edge to her voice. I snatched the papers from her hands, my heart pounding as I flipped through them. My eyes scanned the document quickly at first, then more carefully as something caught my attention. A laugh escaped my lips, not from amusement, but from sheer disbelief. Susan looked at me, puzzled and clearly irritated. "What's so funny?" "Here," I said, pushing the papers back into her hands. "Put on your glasses and read it aloud. Read what you've signed." Reluctantly, she fumbled for her glasses, put them on, and started reading. "This agreement, made and entered into this day by, between," her voice faltered as she continued. The realization dawned slowly. "This isn't a sale contract. It's a loan agreement for consulting services." "Yes, Susan," I said, my voice hard. "That's right. You didn't sell the house. You signed up for a high-interest loan from some scam artist who took advantage of you." Susan's face went pale, her hands trembling as she held the document. "But I thought I was selling the house." There was an ad in the paper and the man was so convincing. He said it could all be done without bothering Lucas with the details, that it was better this way. "You thought you'd sell my house out from under me without even a real check on what you were signing?" I was incredulous, anger and disbelief warring within me. "And you did all of this with Lucas out of town, thinking you could trick me?" Tears started streaming down her face, her earlier composure crumbling. "I just wanted to protect my son from you and your infidelities. I didn't mean for this to happen. I forgot my glasses and everything seemed so legitimate." I stared at her, the weight of everything she'd put me through bearing down on me. "Susan," I said, my voice low and dangerous, "you have gone too far this time. You need to leave. Now." With a heavy heart, but a clear resolve, I watched as Susan packed a few belongings into her bag, still sobbing, still muttering apologies. As she walked out the door, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. When Lucas returned from his business trip, I had a lot to tell him. As soon as he put down his bags, I started unloading everything that had happened, from Susan's attempted deception to the fake documents. He listened, his face growing tighter and more serious with every detail I shared. After I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, just staring at the ground. Then he looked up, his jaw set. "This is unbelievable," he said, his voice firm and angry. "It's time we taught Mom a serious lesson." What she did was way out of line. The next day, after a tearful confrontation with Susan, where she pleaded ignorance and desperation, Lucas decided we needed legal advice. We consulted a lawyer to understand the full implications of what Susan had done. The lawyer was blunt. "From a legal standpoint, your mother-in-law voluntarily took out that loan and signed the contract. She's liable for the repayment," he explained in a no-nonsense tone. Susan's face when she heard that news was something I could never forget. She had thought she could manipulate her way out of the situation, but reality hit hard. She was on the hook for a significant amount of money, and there was no easy way out. Within weeks, she started working 2 jobs just to make ends meet. With Susan now occupied and no longer having time to meddle in our lives, Lucas and I finally found some peace. We decided it was a good time to get away, to give ourselves a chance to heal and reconnect after the chaos. We went to Hawaii for a second honeymoon. It was blissful. We talked a lot about our future during those long, leisurely walks along the beach. "I think we're ready to think about having a baby, don't you?" Lucas said one evening, the sunset casting warm glows on his face. I smiled, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. "Yes, I do. Let's enjoy being us for a little bit longer, and then let's go for it." "Sounds perfect," he replied, kissing me gently. Now, back from Hawaii, life feels lighter, simpler. We spend our weekends planning the garden, redecorating the house, just enjoying each other's company. Lucas supports me in everything, including my career. We've discussed timelines, how we're going to manage our work-life balance, and how excited we are to be parents. It's a new chapter for us, one that's filled with hope and looking forward. We still see Susan. Not very often. She knows she messed up and is still paying the price for it. But we haven't abandoned her. The aftermath of Susan's actions lingered, casting a long shadow over our lives. The trust that had been so easily eroded was difficult to rebuild, not just between Lucas and me, but between Lucas and his mother. It was like a fracture, meticulously repaired but forever visible, a constant reminder of the damage that had been done. Lucas felt immense guilt. Guilt for not seeing Susan's descent into paranoia, guilt for not protecting me from her relentless attacks, and guilt for the financial burden she now faced. He visited her often, helping her navigate the complexities of her new life, offering what little financial assistance we could without enabling her behavior. "She's still my mother, Tessa," he'd say, his voice heavy with conflict. "I can't just abandon her." One understood. I wouldn't want him to abandon his family, despite everything, but it was hard. Hard to see him so consumed by his mother's problems, hard to suppress the resentment that simmered beneath the surface. Our conversations about Susan became strained, punctuated by long silences and unspoken accusations. I longed for the days when we could talk openly, without the weight of her actions pressing down on us. I started seeing a therapist. I needed to unpack the years of feeling like I was never good enough. I needed to find a way to forgive Susan. Therapy helped. It gave me a safe space to express my anger, my fear, my frustration. It helped me understand Susan's motivations, not to excuse her behavior, but to make sense of it. She was a woman driven by fear, a fear of losing her son, a fear of being alone, a fear of irrelevance. Forgiveness is not about condoning the action. My therapist, Dr. Evans, would say, it's about releasing yourself from the bitterness and resentment. It's about reclaiming your power, reclaiming my power. That was the key. I couldn't control Susan's actions, but I could control my reaction to them. I could choose to forgive her, not for her sake, but for mine. Months passed. Susan continued to work tirelessly, slowly chipping away at the debt she'd incurred. She seemed humbled, chastened by the consequences of her actions. One day, Lucas suggested we invite Susan over for dinner. "Are you sure about that?" I asked, my stomach clenching at the thought. "I think it's time," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "For all of us, it's time to move forward." The dinner was awkward, stilted. We made small talk about the weather, about Susan's new job, about anything but the elephant in the room. Susan looked frail, worn down by the demands of her work. Her eyes, still sharp, seemed to hold a flicker of regret. As we were clearing the table, Susan stopped me. "Tessa," she said, her voice low, hesitant. I want to apologize. Really apologize for everything." I looked at her, searching her eyes for sincerity. I saw it there, a genuine remorse that had been absent before. "I know I can't undo what I did," she continued, her voice trembling. "But I want you to know that I'm truly sorry. I was wrong. I was jealous. I was afraid. And I let my fear control me." Tears welled up in her eyes. "You're a good woman, Tessa. You make Lucas happy. And that's all that matters." I felt a lump form in my throat. I wanted to hate her, to hold on to the anger, but I couldn't. The pain in her eyes was too real, the remorse too genuine. "Thank you, Susan," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "I appreciate that." We stood there in silence for a moment, the tension slowly dissipating. Can we try to start over?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, Susan," I said, offering her a small smile. "We can try." It wasn't a full reconciliation, not yet, but it was a start, an unlikely truce forged from the ashes of betrayal and regret. As we navigated the complexities of rebuilding our relationship with Susan, Lucas and I also embarked on another journey, the journey to parenthood. We decided to start trying for a baby. The anticipation was exhilarating, the possibility of creating a new life together filling us with hope and excitement. But the road wasn't easy. Month after month, the pregnancy tests came back negative. Doubt crept in, whispering insidious questions in my ear. Was I broken? Was I not meant to be a mother? We consulted a fertility specialist. The tests revealed nothing conclusive, but the uncertainty lingered. We tried to remain positive, to focus on the joy of our relationship, to trust that things would work out in their own time. But the waiting was agonizing. Then, one morning, I woke up feeling different. A subtle shift in my body, a faint flutter in my stomach. I took a pregnancy test, my hands shaking with anticipation. 2 pink lines. I gasped, tears streaming down my face. I ran to Lucas, waking him with the news. He stared at the test, his eyes widening with disbelief. Then, a slow smile spread across his face. "We're going to be parents," he whispered, pulling me into a tight embrace. "We're really going to be parents." The next 9 months were a whirlwind of doctor's appointments, ultrasounds, and preparations. We painted the nursery a soft blue, filled it with books and toys, and eagerly awaited the arrival of our little one. We told Susan the news. Her reaction was surprisingly emotional. She cried, tears of joy and relief streaming down her face. "I'm going to be a grandmother," she sobbed. "I never thought I'd live to see this day." She became involved in the preparations, offering to help with everything from baby showers to diaper changes. It was as if she was trying to make up for lost time, to prove that she was worthy of being a grandmother. The day our baby was born was the most incredible day of my life. The pain of labor was intense, but the moment I held our son in my arms, everything faded away. He was perfect. Tiny fingers, soft skin, and a head full of dark hair. We named him Ethan. Ethan Lucas Thompson. Lucas stood by my side, tears streaming down his face, his eyes filled with love and awe. Susan was one of the first visitors at the hospital. She held Ethan in her arms, her eyes shining with adoration. "He's beautiful," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "Just beautiful." She looked at me, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Tessa," she said. "Thank you for giving me this." In that moment, I knew that we had finally come full circle. The pain of the past had faded, replaced by the hope of the future. Ethan was a symbol of our resilience, of our ability to forgive, and of the enduring power of love. He was the light that had emerged from the darkness, the promise of a new beginning. Life with Ethan was a beautiful chaos. Sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and the constant demands of a newborn. But it was also filled with joy, laughter, and an overwhelming sense of love. Susan became an integral part of Ethan's life. She babysat, played with him, and showered him with affection. She was a doting grandmother, eager to make up for her past mistakes. Over time, our relationship with Susan deepened. We learned to trust her again, to rely on her, and to appreciate her for who she was. She was flawed, imperfect, but she loved us unconditionally. We never forgot what she had done. The scars remained, a reminder of the pain we had endured. But we chose to focus on the present, on the opportunity to build a better future, not only for ourselves, but for Ethan. We wanted to teach him the importance of forgiveness, of compassion, and of unconditional love. We wanted him to understand that everyone makes mistakes, but that it's how we learn from those mistakes that truly defines us. We wanted him to know that family is not always perfect, but it's always worth fighting for. As I held Ethan in my arms, watching him sleep peacefully, I realized that our story was not just about betrayal and forgiveness. It was about resilience, about the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds, and about the legacy we would leave behind. A legacy of forgiveness. Years passed, painted with the vibrant hues of Ethan's childhood. He was a bright, curious boy, with a mischievous glint in his eyes and a heart overflowing with love. He adored his grandma Susan, oblivious to the turmoil that had once threatened to tear our family apart. We were careful, though. We never spoke of the past in front of Ethan, shielding him from the darkness that had once consumed us. We wanted him to see Susan as the loving, albeit sometimes eccentric, grandmother she was now. But the past has a way of resurfacing, doesn't it? One afternoon, while rummaging through an old box in the attic, Ethan stumbled upon a stack of documents. He brought them to me, his brow furrowed with confusion. "Mom, what are these?" he asked, holding up the loan agreement with Susan's signature. My heart skipped a beat. I took the documents, my hands trembling slightly. "These are old papers, sweetie," I said, trying to sound casual. "They're not important." But Ethan was persistent. "But what do they say? Why does Grandma's name on them?" I knew I couldn't avoid the conversation any longer. I sat him down and, in age-appropriate terms, explained the situation. I told him about Susan's fear, her mistrust, and the mistake she had made. He listened intently, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. "Grandma tried to sell our house?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes, sweetie," I said, my heart aching for him. "But she didn't, and she's very sorry for what she did." Ethan was silent for a long moment, processing the information. Then he looked at me, his eyes filled with anger. "Why would she do that? Doesn't she love us?" "She does love us, Ethan," I said, stroking his hair. "But sometimes people make mistakes. And sometimes love can make people do crazy things." I explained to him that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it means choosing to move forward, to learn from the past, and to build a better future. He understood, at least as much as a child could. He was still angry, still hurt, but he also saw the genuine remorse in Susan's eyes. It was a delicate balancing act, navigating the tightrope of family, trying to protect Ethan while also honoring the complex history that had shaped us. That evening, Ethan confronted Susan. He didn't yell, he didn't accuse, but he asked her, simply and directly, "Why did you try to sell our house, Grandma?" Susan's face crumpled. She knelt down to his level, took his hands in hers, and looked him in the eye. "Because I was scared, Ethan," she said, her voice trembling. "I was scared of losing your dad. I was scared of losing you and your mom. I thought I was protecting my family, but I was wrong. I made a terrible mistake, and I'm so sorry." She started to cry, tears streaming down her face. Ethan hugged her, his small arms wrapping tightly around her. "I forgive you, Grandma," he said, his voice muffled by her shoulder. In that moment, I realized the true power of forgiveness. It wasn't just about me or Lucas or even Susan. It was about Ethan, about breaking the cycle of anger and resentment, and about creating a future where love and compassion prevailed. Seeing Ethan forgive Susan was a turning point. It allowed us to finally close the chapter on the past, to release the remaining bitterness, and to embrace the present with open hearts. We started talking more openly about the past, sharing our experiences, our fears, and our hopes for the future. We learned to communicate more effectively, to listen to each other's perspectives, and to support each other through the inevitable challenges of life. Life, as it always does, threw us another curveball. Susan was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. The news hit us hard, shattering the fragile peace we had worked so hard to build. The diagnosis was grim. The doctors gave her a few months to live. We rallied around her, determined to make her remaining time as comfortable and meaningful as possible. Lucas took time off work to care for her. I helped with the cooking and cleaning, and Ethan spent hours by her side, reading to her and telling her stories. Susan faced her illness with remarkable courage and grace. She had no regrets, she said. She had made mistakes, but she had also learned from them. She had loved. She had been loved, and she was grateful for the time she had been given. The last few weeks of her life were filled with laughter, tears, and cherished memories. We sat by her bedside, holding her hand, sharing stories, and expressing our love. She died peacefully, surrounded by her family. Her death left a void in our lives, a deep sense of loss that would never fully heal. But it also brought us closer together, reminding us of the importance of cherishing every moment, of forgiving each other's flaws, and of living life to the fullest. At Susan's funeral, Ethan stood up and spoke. He talked about her kindness, her strength, and her unwavering love. He talked about her mistakes, but he also talked about her redemption. "Grandma taught me the importance of forgiveness," he said, his voice clear and strong. "She taught me that even when people make mistakes, we should always try to see the good in them. She taught me that love is stronger than hate, and that family is the most important thing in the world." His words touched everyone in attendance, bringing tears to their eyes. As I looked at Ethan, standing there with such poise and grace, I knew that we had succeeded. We had broken the cycle of anger and resentment, and we had instilled in him the values that would guide him through life. Susan's legacy would live on, not in her mistakes, but in her redemption, in her love, and in the lessons she had taught us all. We were a circle of love, bound together by shared experiences, by forgiveness, and by an unwavering commitment to each other. Years later, Ethan graduated from college. He was a kind, compassionate, and intelligent young man, with a bright future ahead of him. As he walked across the stage, receiving his diploma, I couldn't help but think of Susan. She would have been so proud. After the ceremony, Ethan turned to me and Lucas, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he said, "for everything, for teaching me the importance of forgiveness, for showing me the power of love, and for always being there for me." We hugged him tightly, our hearts overflowing with love and pride. Life continued its unpredictable journey, filled with joy, sorrow, and everything in between. But through it all, we remained a family, bound together by the enduring power of love and forgiveness. The scars of the past may have faded, but the lessons we learned remained, guiding us, shaping us, and reminding us that even in the darkest of times, hope can always prevail. Our messy, complicated, but ultimately loving family was proof of that. It was and would always be enough, and the cycle would end here, not with me, or Lucas, or even Susan, but with our son, Ethan.